You just heard from Government House Leader Karina Gold. With me now live in studio, I guess I could say, or in the foyer of the House, Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer and NDP House Leader Peter Julien. Good to see both of you again. You were on the program this weekend, so glad to see you after the first question period. Mr. Scheer, I'm going to pick up where I left off with Minister Gold on the subject of the consumer portion of the carbon tax. This weekend, the leader of your party said that the increase would lead to a so-called nuclear winter. What proof do you have that that will be the case?
Well, we know from the Canadian Trucking Association that at its current levels, the carbon tax is already destroying about $2 billion a year in extra costs that's passed down on to consumers. Our major trading partners don't have a carbon tax. By fully implementing, quadrupling the carbon tax, we would see more jobs and investment flow to the United States. We would see higher prices for consumers who are already struggling to be able to afford basic essentials like home utilities and food on their table. And what's really frustrating about all this is that they've been aided all along the way by the NDP. And Jagmeet Singh now is trying to pretend like he's had some kind of flip-flop, that now he's not so sure about it. But sellout Jagmeet Singh has voted in favor of the carbon tax 24 times. When Conservatives tried to bring relief and pause it on things like home heating or on summer road trips by suspending the tax, the NDP have blocked those attempts. So, voters should not be fooled. But what we're ultimately saying is, let's go to the Canadian people. Let's allow the Canadian people to choose between the Liberal NDP plan to quadruple the carbon tax and our plan to axe the tax.
And certainly I'm going to ask Mr. Julien in a moment for clarification. But for example, when you say our major trading partners, it's true that the U.S. at a national level doesn't have a carbon tax. At a state level, many of the states do. In Europe, they feel so strongly about having a price on carbon that they're going to levy an additional tax if they end up trading with people or with partners that don't. Is a Conservative government open to being punished by Europe just on this?
None of our major trading partners have a carbon tax that looks anything like Justin Trudeau's or is as high as Justin Trudeau is planning on it. We're talking about a monumental increase, 61 cents a litre. That is like shooting yourself in the foot.
It's 3 cents for every increase.
When you look at the combined total of the fuel standard, the carbon tax increases, you add it all together, Justin Trudeau's plan, the Liberal plan, with the support of the NDP, is to raise the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. That will be the full effect of it. That would have catastrophic economic effects. It would also drive up prices.
You're conflating a lot of different things, though. I'm focused here on the consumer portion of the carbon tax. It's just to deal in facts. I understand you're concerned about affordability. I put it to Minister Gold. But it's not all the same thing. With all due respect, it's not. The consumer carbon tax is 3 cents a litre every time it goes up. It's not nothing, but there's also a rebate.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer has clearly demonstrated that the vast majority of Canadians pay far more in the carbon tax than anything they hope to get back in the rebate. Justin Trudeau's plan is to quadruple it. The NDP have supported that. They voted in favor of the Liberal environment approach. I shouldn't call it an environment approach because under this plan, Canada has actually fallen behind in climate change rankings. So with the NDP Liberal approach, the carbon tax will be quadrupled. With the Conservative approach, we're going to axe the tax. And what we're saying is, why not let the Canadian people decide? We've been having this debate now for several months. Why don't we just go to the Canadian people, put our approaches in front of them, and let them choose the direction they want the country to go?
The only quick thing I would add to that is what the PBO said was when you take into account the impact on the economy, more Canadians are worse off than better off. But that was also including the industrial carbon price, which he now has to take out and recalculate. When he looked at the straight up indirect and direct impacts, 8 out of 10 he calculated were better off with the rebate. So it's not quite as black and white
Canadians
as you're putting
it. Canadians don't get to pick and choose which parts of those costs they have to pay.
To be fair to Mr. Scheer, Mr. Julien, I don't understand what your party's position is on the consumer tax, carbon tax. Can you be unequivocal tonight?
Well, first off, I'd like to say that the comments about a nuclear winter from Pierre Poilievre and the figures that they're throwing out that are bogus just do a disservice to Parliament. I mean, the nuclear winter my constituents lived through 3 years ago when we had the heat dome killed 600 people in the Lower Mainland. So climate change is real. We see this with Jasper as well. And the reality is the Conservatives are just not a serious party when it comes to issues of the environment and climate change, and they're not good with figures. When it comes to what the NDP is proposing, we believe that the industrial emitters who have been given basically an exemption in so many cases actually have to pay their fair share. And the approach that the NDP will be taking, and you'll be hearing about more in detail in the coming period, will be to put more of a focus on industrial emitters and less of a focus on consumers.
To be fair, you're criticizing the Conservatives for a lack of a plan. You've now come out almost at the 11th hour, according to Mr. Singh last week, and said you oppose the consumer side of the carbon tax, and you don't have any specifics other than you make the industrial side more intensive. Already the industrial side, according to the Canadian Climate Institute, is contributing the most, bar none, to reducing emissions towards that 2030 goal, even the 2026 goal. It will do more, according to the Canadian Climate Institute, than any other policy to cut emissions, delivering between 20 and 48% of emissions reductions expected. Why are you trying to make that even stronger when it's actually working? The industry is participating. There's no leakage at this moment. Like, how does this make any sense other than it's political opportunism aimed at winning a by-election taking place tonight?
I think it's fair to say that when we look at the actual progress that we've made on combating climate change, that the Liberals have not done what they said that they would do. And it takes a new approach, since the Conservatives are not even taking climate change, not even taking climate change seriously. But the NDP will be proposing, and it's fair to say at this point we haven't released the plan, but we will be.
When? The same question I asked Mr. Scheer over and over. When? I think Canadians deserve to know.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough that this is something that we'll be doing over the course of the next few weeks, and we'll be presenting it to Canadians.
So in the next few weeks, Mr. Scheer, why don't you also release to Canadians, since you want a carbon tax election tomorrow, what you do in lieu of a carbon tax, and whether or not you would even have the same objectives to mitigate climate change?
Well, we've been starting to fill in broad strokes our approach, which would be to favor technology and not taxes. And
I have no idea what that
some
means.
of the things, well, allow me to explain. Greenlight some of the things that the Liberal government has said no to. When there was a tidal energy project in Atlantic Canada that would harness the power of ocean waves to create clean electricity, the Liberals refused to grant a permit to that. When our major trading partners came and said, please, Canada, sell us your LNG so we can get off of coal and Russian energy, Justin Trudeau said there was no market for that. The number,
building those factories would cause more emissions,
the amount
right?
of greenhouse gas emissions that China puts into the air with its coal-powered electrical plants dwarfs what Canada does every year. And we know that we can reduce emissions for the planet as a whole by exporting more of our clean, ethical LNG and getting developing countries off of coal.
You don't know for sure there's a customer for that.
There's no benefit. They came begging, Vassy.
I interviewed them all, and they said if it was available, they would. But they also get it cheaper other places, and they're going to buy that one. I did those interviews, Mr. Scheer.
Facility in like 90 days, and our government can't even permit. It won't even begin into discussions. But the most important thing is what you're talking about.
Sell LNG?
You talked about the maneuver by the NDP to fool voters in a by-election, and for those voters watching, they have to understand that this is all a stunt. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP love the carbon tax. They voted in favor of it over 24 times, and they will not axe the tax. Only the Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre will do that.
Is your message, though, not self-interested as well? As I put to you over the weekend, a majority of Canadians don't want an election right now.
The majority
Why
of Canadians,
are you pushing one so much? Because you think you'll win.
The majority of Canadians don't want to pay higher carbon taxes. The majority of Canadians don't want more drugs and criminals in their communities. The majority of Canadians don't want to see housing costs continue to rise. This isn't just like, we prefer this timing over that timing.
Sure,
it's
but
Canadians
maybe they
are suffering
want your party
through a
to work
crisis.
with other parties to address those issues.
The NDP and Liberals have made it clear that all they're going to do is double down on the same policies that caused this crisis in the first place. The massive borrowing and money printing caused the inflation crisis. The carbon tax drove up the cost of food. It is a major component to it. So they have been clear. We have been trying for the last 2 years to try to get them to see the light and change course. They have refused. So now the only way to end the suffering that Canadians are going through is to let them make a choice between which approach they want.
So when the carbon tax is gone, all the suffering ends?
It's only one component of our plan, Vassy. We're going to help bring down prices and interest rates by repairing the budget. We're going to get new homes built on the market by rewarding.
Interest rates are down.
No. Prices are not down.
They're escalating a lower rate. I got to give Mr. Julien one last.
They're
rising slower. That's fair. Mr. Julien, last week. Look, Mr. Scheer. Wait one moment. Mr. Scheer has a point. You have had multiple opportunities to voice your opposition to the consumer carbon tax over the last number of years. You have taken barely any of those opportunities, save for and except what happened in Atlantic Canada. Doesn't this look like complete naked political opportunism?
No, we have been pushing consistently to end an exemption on industrial polluters. And I wanted to come back to Mr. Scheer's comments about a vote for the Conservatives. A vote for the Conservatives in Elmwood-Transcona, where Leela Dance will be a remarkable member of Parliament to represent that area, is a vote for Conservative cuts. And we saw this under Harper, cuts to healthcare, cuts to any sort of climate science, cuts to services that Canadians depend upon. That is the Conservative offer, slicing
You must be
and
worried about
dicing
that. You must be
all of the
worried about the
services.
threat of the Conservatives if last week all of a sudden you're saying, hey, after a few years of supporting the government that implemented this policy, this consumer carbon tax, all of a sudden we don't think it's the right policy.
We have been saying consistency over the last couple of years that the Liberals should be putting this kind of price on pollution for industrial emitters. They
That's
have
not the
failed
same
to do
thing.
so. No, but they have failed to do so. And so, as I mentioned in our interview last
That
week,
price is working.
we hit a wall in terms of what Liberals were prepared to do, and that is why Jagmeet Singh ripped up the confidence and supply agreement.
Okay, I've hit a wall on the time I'm allotted for this segment, so I will leave it there. I appreciate both of you making the time for the conversation, as always. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer and NDP House Leader Peter Julien.